Welcome to this week's edition of Word of Truth Podcast. This is Jordan.
And this is Jaron, and I'm really excited for this week's discussion. We're going to be diving in to what I've titled The Generation Lost and dealing with the seeming lack of purpose or the struggle with purpose that we're seeing with our generation. And just kind of to set the stage with the title, in the 1920s, there was a generation that was dubbed the Lost Generation. They were the ones that were coming of age post World War One, coming into the Roaring '20s and then the Great Depression, and they were seen and looked at and dubbed the Lost Generation because it seemed like there was a bunch of people, running around living life without much of a purpose. And we see that this name has kind of resurfaced dealing with the millennial and later, or like older Gen Z generations, as the Atlantic and I believe also the Times have dubbed us the new lost generation. And so this is a problem that we're seeing, this struggle with purpose. And we kind of want to hit on some of the problems this week and deal with hopefully finding a resolution in coming podcasts following.
So I think one thing that's going to help us too, and is something I really want us to make note of, is the age of the millennials, which was brought out. So when people look at the kids who are 14, 15, they're not part of that millennial generation. They're in the generation that follows. So when we talk about millennials, we're talking about people who are now 22 years old and older, up to one article said up to 38 years old.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
So that's just a side note, but kind of keep that in mind in your personal life before you dub something as the millennial mindset or something that millennials do. Know about who you're talking about. But what I wanted to bring in are some passages that I have heard, I have thought on, and I've struggled with for a little bit. In Colossians chapter 3 and verse 16 and 17, we are told to do all things, whether in word or deed, for Christ. In Ephesians 5 and verse 16, it says, make the most of your time because the days are evil. In John chapter 9 and verse 4, it says, work, for the night is coming. And in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 10, it says, he who does not work, neither shall he eat. A lot of verses I just threw out, but one thing that we're going to hit on is this idea that millennials have, our age group that we have, is we have to constantly be at work. And it's definitely something I've struggled with, where I do feel guilty as a new father. When Jaron and I were talking about this, he said, this is one that I relate to, speaking of him. And I said, dude, so do I. I struggle with my purpose. I'm doing what I've wanted to do, as in preaching the gospel, but there are other things I have to do to be able to have health benefits and stuff, and I struggle with my purpose. Am I doing what I really want to do? And as a father, as a husband, as an employee, as a preacher, more often than not, I feel like I am failing in every one of those areas than I feel like I'm actually succeeding. And the times when I feel like I am failing the most is when I take time to relax and to chill. And honestly, it might be an hour from the time I get off of UPS to and the time I get home. And I might have an hour before I go and start working on sermon prep, class prep, try and make some calls out to some members who have been sick, or trying to set up a study, preparing for the podcast, right? The list continues to go on. And I struggle with this because I'm like, there's so much more I should have done in that hour than sit down and drink a cup of coffee, And so that's what we want to talk about, is talk about this struggle that we have to find purpose and the detriment that comes with the mindset that we have to always be at work.
Yeah. And you hit on that very well leading into it. And that'll be dealing more with kind of the second level of things I want to hit on. because the way that I want to structure this conversation is first we're going to do the easy thing and pick on social media because you can blame just about anything and everything on social media and kind of work it down from there.
But there's a couple things with social media that I think, without getting into our next part of our discussion, that I want to hit on, because we do have the obvious things to bring out with social media.
Yeah.
But I think, like, this week I've tried to dig a little bit deeper with that. Like, why do I feel, this way, and why does it lead to this? And it is because of social media, but in a different aspect.
Oh,
So
I 100% agree. And the reason I said it that way is because our society, when we don't know the issue that is at hand, we just immediately point social media without discussing anything deeper than that. It's just get off of it. And and we've talked about it. We had a series on it actually a little while ago, talking
yeah,
about social media pluses and minuses. And today we're going to focus a little bit more on some of the negative effects, especially with how we currently in our society use social media. And so that's one of our first problems, though, that we want to bring up when talking about this is how social media plays into this seeming lack of purpose or inability to find your purpose. And so whenever I look at this in like through my lens, the issue I find is what is social media about? It's about people posting curated versions of their lives online for you to see. So when you look and you see these things, you look at Freddie over here who's posting this great life where he balances work, he's always traveling, he seems like he has this great purpose at the job he's working at, doing great things, whatever. He has a purpose, a goal, a mindset that he is achieving through what he posts on social media. And now we all know that people are doing the same things across the world with social media, that we're all posting the best version of our lives to make it seem like we have purpose, and then seeing Freddie and being like, man, he has such a better purpose than I do. But Freddie's on the other end looking at you and saying, wow, he has such a better life because he has a purpose. And so this is the issue that happens is we all are sitting here thinking, man, everyone else has this great purpose that they're working towards, yet I don't. And then you feel empty on the inside, and then it drives you to then question what you're doing and make it feel like all that you're doing is for nothing because you don't have the purpose that other people have. And that's a huge issue that lies kind of at the root of this question.
yeah. I mean, we can look. let- Let's even talk about your Instagram and everything. I see that, and Brandy and I have talked, and we're like, man, we wish we were more adventurous in that sense, as in wanting to go and drive an hour to go hiking
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But then it's also like, that's not really us at this time. But we see that, and we want that, and we're like, look at the peace that he can find being out there in the mountains or wherever it might be. um, and we're just like, we wish that we had that, but right now it's like we can't be that adventurous, and so we often feel empty and kind of loss of purpose in that sense. Look at ourselves as boring, right? We're like, we're only 26 or 27, and we're not doing any of this. Why aren't we doing any of this? And it is tough. But I also think and one thing I've struggled with social media, um, is, yes, you see people's best lives, but lately I've been seeing a different trend, especially on Facebook, where a lot of people that I've gone to school with, um, either in high school or college, they have a career change, or they stopped working, they moved, and they're hiking through the Grand Canyon or wherever. But it's nice to see those pictures. But if you look at the post before, you see the mental toll that they took, the loss of purpose that they had in their previous job. And then now they did this move, they took this chance, and they went and they're doing this stuff. And I look at that, and it doesn't affect me like, oh, I want to be in the Grand Canyon. Look at the money and the vacation time they must have to be able to do this. My mentality is, how do I get that mentality to take a chance and to make that change? Because here they looked at themselves And they were like, you know what, we're gonna leave this safe job that we have that takes care of our benefits, takes care of our salary, and whatever else it might be. I'm gonna take a chance. I'm gonna make a move. I'm gonna go to this other place, and I'm gonna really search to find what I want. And for me, it's been tough to see that because, I don't want to work. I want to preach, and I want that to be my main focus. Right now, I also need to have another job just because of the way that the benefits are. It's nearly impossible to have good benefits at a reasonable price. And so, I continue to work at UPS, and here's my loss of purpose because I'm like, why am I just wasting my time here? I've been here for years. This is not, and I know deep down, this is not what I want to do. I'm not happy. But how do I get into the mentality to take that chance that I see all these people taking on Facebook? And it's like 2020 was a wake up call for a lot of people. And they took that chance, and I'm like, how come I'm not getting it, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's difficult and it's curated through it comes through the social media, because there's a little bit of like we see these things and not to like I don't know how to say it right, but you kind of have a sense of almost envy or like you want what they have, but you don't know how to get it, you know?
Hmm.
And it really drives further into this idea of like you see these things online and you end up searching for something that you don't know how to find and it just makes you feel lost, and we're looking to these people to try and figure out how to do it, and it's when you look at them it's like they do these crazy things and it's like great, except for how does that fulfill your purpose by camping in the Grand Canyon? Have you found much more of a purpose than you had before, or are you just excited by the entertainment that is from that temporary trip or whatever?
Yeah. And, the thing that I've gone back and forth on, because like I have looked, there's these other jobs that would be fewer hours, that less stressful, um, that I could go to and I could work if needed. But now, I like the verses I brought up before. In Second Thessalonians 3:10, he who does not work, neither shall he eat. You read, that you are to provide for your own family. Well, I look at those and it's like, okay, so I provide for my family. I need to provide spiritually, but so often that comes last because I'm letting that fall to after I provide physically a home, a car, food or money for food for the table, health benefits, 401k, um, life insurance, like all these other things. And you go, like how can I see all these other people kind of like set that aside for the moment? But how do I reconcile these verses with doing that? And that's where I've been stuck for a while. Is I look at these and I go, this is how I'm to provide. Here's the opportunity I was given at 20 years old. I've been with this company since then. It's been good, and I'm not looking for an answer like, email me a job application, That's not what I'm looking for. But this is where I've really struggled, and it hasn't been until we really started to talk about this that I've been able to identify where my problem has been,
Yeah,
where I am so focused because I mean, you read these verses and God doesn't lay out, you provide this, this, and this in these ways. It's you provide.
yeah,
Now
exactly.
it's up for you to have the wisdom through my word to discern how do you do that? How do you take care of all these things? And I think so often, especially with the articles that you brought up, um, that you had sent to me, there is this push for uh, us to always be working. And you see on social media, it's all some people, and I've been guilty of this, brag about how many hours they've worked in a week. There was I think a 2 month span where I worked 83 hours a week. I had no time for anything. So that meant, you know, eating. I just ate whatever I could as fast as I could that was convenient on the way to my next job. And then, so my eating habits were not good. I wasn't exercising because what energy would I have had? When you work 83 hours in a week, God did not create man to do that. You do what you need to do for your family at the time, but again, that's what you see on social media is almost this bragging about how many hours, and it is like a competition. Well, if they work that many hours, am I really an adult if I only put in 35 hours this week, maybe 40 hours this week,
Yeah.
or is that just child's play at this point?
Oh, and you have that competition that through social media, you can never win it, because if you're then bragging about how many hours you work, you don't have the time to do the other things. And then you see someone take a vacation and go on a trip, and you're like, man, I wish I had all the free time to do that. And it just takes you in circles because you can't have, and this is being quite frank, you cannot work like crazy and play like crazy. Work hard, play hard. In the context, I guess it works, but in the sense that we're kind of talking about, you can't be a workaholic and have all this spare leisure time. It doesn't mesh together. And that kind of leads and segues into the next issue, which I think kind of lies a little bit below the surface of social media, which is burnout. As you were talking about, that's one thing that I think a lot of us experience. It's kind of a state of being, and I know that was, at least for me through college, that was my state of being, was just in that burnout place where it's like I have a huge to-do list of things that need to happen, and it's like you start on the top and you start going down, but you never actually get to the bottom, because once you get like two things in, five more come, and you just keep going to the point where it's like you can hit on the big things, but it's the small things that get put aside. And I believe that was in one of the articles. So context for people listening, I sent two articles that kind of set the stage for what my mindset was when looking at, what we're going to be talking about today. um, and hopefully I'll remember, I haven't been great about that, to link them in the show notes so that you can kind of read and hopefully get some more context on some of these problems. But one of the big ones that were hit on in both of those is this idea of burnout, because we're constantly connected, we're constantly having this pressure to work, we're constantly being overloaded and broken down and burn out with all of the things that need to be, quote unquote, kept up with in our day-to-day lives, and it just gets to, as humans, we are not supposed to be functioning 24/7, and that's with social media. It's a constant slew of things being thrown your way. And then with the mindset with work, luckily in my workplace, when I leave for the day, I'm done. But I know at Netflix, I'd actually just watched a video on this. They give you like unlimited vacation, but they expect you, if you're gone or if you're out of office, that you're going to be checking in and constantly thinking about your work. That is just your general corporate workplace. There's no shutting down, there's no turning it off. It's just constantly with you. And it breaks you down over time.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about burnout, it's one where you might even look at yourself and say, I'm not, or I rarely get burned out. Um, I can tell you from being a husband, if you talk to Brandy, she can tell you that happens more often than not, that I'm just burned out, I'm ready to check out, and I'm just done, because there will be the simplest thing. She'll say, Jordan, sometime this week, can you do this? And I'll say, yeah. And it'll be like Saturday night or Saturday during the day. And I'll have all week long, have the weekend, and it'll come like Thursday and it'll be, Jordan, can you still get this done? Yeah, I'll get it done. But every day, I thought about it. I'm like, I just don't have the energy for it. Just don't want to do it. And then Thursday comes, yeah, I'll get it. Friday comes, yes, I'll get it at some point. And the next thing I know, it's the end of the week.
Yeah.
It's already Saturday again, and it's like, okay, now I have to get this done.
Yeah.
We get so burned out because again, we have that mindset. We have to continuously be doing something. Um, And I think with our work environment now, not just like individually what company you work for and what you do, but just general overall with businesses being open Monday through Sunday, there isn't, you no longer have your defined weekend. Because a lot of people now, you'll get one day here, maybe on a Tuesday off, and then you'll get a Friday off. And I mean, that's how it is for a lot of people. At UPS, we used to only be a 5-day operation where you went Monday through Friday. Now they go Monday through Saturday, and everybody only works 5 days unless we need more people, and then suddenly we all work 6 days, so you only get Sunday off, but that doesn't really feel like a day off because all you're doing is thinking about when you have to go in next. And I think that has also played into feeling burned out, is we no longer have that defined, like you were talking about earlier, the work hard, play hard. You knew when it was time for work, and you knew when it was time to just go play, go mess around, and have time to just catch your breath and be yourself for a minute. And I don't feel like we really have that anymore, because it's just constant work everywhere.
And the reason why this is tying into our issue of finding a purpose is because when you get to that point of being so constantly stressed out or tired or feeling like you're only working, I know at least for me, whenever I was kind of going through that before I ended up getting a job here, it's like you sit down every night before I go to bed for the 4 hours of whatever it was during peak season. You sit
Oh,
down and it's like, man, this cannot be what life is. Like, life is not about being constantly tired, constantly stressed, constantly thinking about, all right, what's the next thing I have to do? And that's not why God made us. We have this, we're given a purpose to first glorify God in all that we do, as you had brought up earlier. And that is what we were built for, bearing God's image and glorifying Him. We misplace that with doing work here a lot. And when we put our purpose within the work, or we see that as our purpose, you're going to end up being burnt out, and you're going to end up feeling lost, and you're not going to have a purpose that's worth standing on. And real quick, I wrote this out and I really liked it, kind of cap that point. It's like, because if you try and find your meaning through superficial ways, then your meaning will be just as superficial as the things that you're looking at. So if I try and put it in work, in job, in money, in cars, and whatever achievement I can get here, that's going to be the beginning and end of your purpose. You know, until you look outside of what you can see, you're not going to have a purpose, or not at least not one worth living for.
and the verses that I brought up, I want to just make sure everyone knows. I know I just pulled these out of context, but so often that's how it's presented to us. And so when we read these, even when we read them in context, we think of them in this way that's so out of context.
Yeah.
And because I mean, you reconcile it all with what the gospel teaches. You look in Matthew chapter 6 as Jesus is, nearing towards the latter half of his Sermon on the Mount. He says, "Don't worry about what you'll eat, what you'll drink, what you'll wear. Uh, don't get caught up in these earthly things," right? But then we say, go work, go, make sure that you have the best food, everything. And that's why we work so hard. That's why we get so stressed out. And we kind of make our identity our work. Um, and that causes such an issue because now we're taking, and I really like this quote. I forget which article it was in, but it says, we start to make everything that's good bad, and everything that's bad feels good. So working all the time is bad, but we've been told from the time that we were young, you work hard, you put in the hours, you put in your time, you're going to get the money, you're going to get the raise, you're going to have the pension, which I don't really know how many companies really still have pensions. They're trading that off for the 401k match. But So you do all that, and so that's been the mindset for years. And then you get into the workplace and you realize I'm working hard, I'm doing what I can to save, but with the way that the cost of living is going, it's getting more difficult too. And you just need to be, it is hard to be that disciplined all the time. But you're working hard, you're putting in all these hours and everything. And then at the end of the day, you're still stressed about finances. You're still stressed about and it's like everything that I was told before, if you do these things financially, you don't need to worry. And it's like, why do I still have this worry then? And
And
Dave Ramsey can answer that.
yeah. Well, but like the end result of that is it leads you to this existential crisis of like, this cannot be what life is about. And that kind of leads us into the third and final point, which I think is kind of the root of all of the stuff that we've talked about so far, is we've been developing a misplaced identity. We're so focused on, like you're saying, on doing all the work, putting in and making sure everyone around us knows how hard we have done, all the things that we've done, how hard we've worked to get to where we are, how many hours we're putting into office, how many vacations we've taken, how much purpose we have in our lives. We're so focused on, putting our identity in these things that we lose purpose in general, because if your purpose isn't to impress people, you're sadly going to be disappointed. There's always going to be someone more impressive. If your purpose is in your work, at some point you're going to retire or you're going to start hating your job, because that's kind of the way life goes. If your purpose is in taking vacations or traveling or whatever else, all these things are misplacing your identity, and you're going to end up feeling lost and hopeless and without a purpose. And that is kind of the root of all of this.
One thing that I really like, and I know I brought it up earlier in a different way, but in Colossians 3 and verse 16 through 17, when you understand what your identity is as a created being and as a faithful Christian, when you understand that your purpose is to serve God and keep his commandments, as we're told in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, that's the conclusion of the whole matter, then your work is not going to be focused on me trying to be like pleasing to my company. I can work hard, real hard for the company that I work for and be taken advantage of. And it like, and it's a humbling understanding. It's kind of disappointing and depressing, but to understand that we're all replaceable in our positions, there's always somebody else. Um, so because when you think like, if I do this, if I give everything to my company, company is going to give the same back to me. They're not. They won't, because it's a business. They're looking for people to come in like worker bees, do their job, go home, come back the next day, repeat. And so, your company is not going to take more care of you than you take care of yourself. So I can't let my identity be in my company. I can't let my identity be in my work, be in the hours that I put in. My identity needs to be with God. And when I work for him, I am going to find my purpose. I am going to feel fulfilled. But it's going to take time to get to that realization and to feel that, to be like Paul, to learn to be content in all things and not worry about how much is in my savings, how much 401k do I have, what's my health benefits going to be like. We want to make all those things certain, and that's pretty difficult to do.
Well, and we deal with a lot of symptoms, as you're kind of hitting on, with like, I need to get a promotion, I need to have this set up and that set up, and I need these things for my family. You're dealing with a lot of symptoms to find your purpose rather than dealing with actually finding your purpose. And we're going to leave you on a cliffhanger with that and not address that issue until next week, because we have a whole new discussion kind of helping to build from this foundation. So the root of the issue is misplaced identity. How do we start? First, by finding our identity, and working up from there to find our purpose and deal with the other issues we talked about, with the social media issue, with burnout, and with all the other kind of tangentially related issues that stem from a misplaced identity. Huh?
Nothing.
Okay. Tangentially is a
Yeah.
weird word. I don't know if I like it or not, but we're going with it. So on that note, I really hope that you guys join us again next week as we continue this discussion. Um, and as we kind of help maybe give a playbook, maybe just give you something to think about when it comes to where you place your identity, where you place your purpose for life. With that being said, we'd like to thank you for listening to this week's edition of A Word of Truth podcast.
Oscars.
Podcast. Oh, restart. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of A Word of Truth podcast. Give you a friendly reminder that he who has ears to hear, listen up,
Listen up.
and have a good weekend. It sounded delayed, but we're going with it.
Oh, it sounded fine on my end. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.